Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Gyanantimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam with commentary by Srila Visvanatha Cakravarti Thakur, Chapter 3, which described the avatars, concludes with the description of Vyas handing this knowledge over to Shukadev. We concluded with these verses. Vyas had his son Shukadev, best of the self-controlled, study this scripture, the Srimad Bhagavatam, for it is the very essence of all the Vedas and all the histories. Shukadev then spoke the Bhagavatam to King Parikshit, who was surrounded by the great sages as he sat fasting till death on the bank of the Ganga. So Vyasadev compiled the Shastra, Srimad Bhagavatam, handed it over to his son, Shukadev. After he had studied it and mastered it, then Shukadev spoke it to Maharaj Parikshit, who was cursed to die within 7 days due to an incident which we'll hear about later. So it goes on to say, though Krishna left Dwarka and arrived at Prabhas and then disappeared along with his 6 great qualities, this Purana, another form of the sun, has now risen in this Kali Yuga for those who have lost their knowledge. So when Krishna left this world, here it says Krishna left Dwarka and arrived at Prabhas, but then left this world like the sun setting, the Bhagavatam rose like the rising sun, and thus Krishna remained within the world in the form of this Srimad Bhagavatam. Seated in this assembly out of his great mercy, Sutta Goswami is now speaking, I was seated in that assembly when Shukadev spoke to Maharaj Parikshit. Seated in that assembly out of his great mercy, I learned the scripture from the powerful Shukadev. So Sutta Goswami is narrating the story, and he's saying how he was also there in the assembly of the sages when Maharaj Parikshit heard the Srimad Bhagavatam from Shukadev. So I learned this scripture from the powerful Shukadev who recited it there. I will teach you this scripture as I learned it according to Shukadev's realization. So now he's telling the sages who have assembled at Naimisharanya, now I will teach you the same scripture, the Srimad Bhagavatam, as I heard it. This is the way of Parampara. I heard it from Shukadev. Shukadev heard it from his father, Vyasadev. So I heard it in the assembly when Maharaj Parikshit, who was cursed to die within 7 days, sat fasting and hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam from Shukadev, and the assembled sages gathered at that time. I was also within that assembly. And what I heard, I will now teach you. So in this way, chapter 3 comes to an end. Chapter 4, the appearance of Narada to Vyas. Vyas said, among the sages gathered for the long sacrifice, Shanak, eldest by age, of high parentage and superior in Vedic knowledge, praised Sutta, who had just spoken, and began speaking. Commentary. In this 4th chapter, which is entitled The Appearance of Narada Muni to Vyas, the excellence of the speaker and the hearer of the Bhagavatam are declared. Also, the mercy that Vyas received and its previous absence are described. Because he was the eldest by age and superior by family lineage, Kulapati, and superior by knowledge acquired through studying the Vedas, Shanak was chosen by the sages to ask the questions. So Shanak is the inquirer. He is senior most and revered by everyone. So Shanak said, O Sutta, O fortunate soul, best of speakers, please tell us the pure stories related to the Lord which the glorious Shukadev, spoke at the assembly of Parikshit. So Shanaka is the sage who is inquiring from Sutta Goswami, and he's saying, oh, please tell us, with reverence, he says, Sutta Sutta Mahabhag, oh, greatly fortunate soul, Mahabhag, you are greatly fortunate. You were there and you heard that. Right there in the presence of Shukadev. You were sitting there. So you heard this in the assembly when all had gathered. So now please tell us, yes, please tell us the glorious story of Shukadev as he spoke at the assembly of Maharaj Parikshit. In which yuga? In what place? And for what reason did that sage write this work? Who inspired him to write it? So the inquiry comes now that when did Vyasadev write the Srimad Bhagavatam, in what yuga, what place, and what was the purpose? Why did he write it? Who inspired him to write this? His son, a great yogi, Shukadev, seeing all things equally, fully realized in Brahman, with mind concentrated on one goal, having dispelled ignorance, hid himself from the public and appeared to be like a fool. Shukadev was also a great yogi who had detached himself from all material things, hiding himself from public, and if he did appear anywhere, he just presented himself like some fool. So he was a great yogi, all fully realized in Brahman. So how did it come that this knowledge was transferred to him? The story begins, the young women playing in the water on seeing the clothed Vyas pursuing his naked son who had left home became bashful and put on their clothing. Vyas was astonished that they were not embarrassed when his naked son passed by. When Vyas asked them for the reason, they replied, you make distinctions of male and female, but he does not. They could see, he does not see like that, but you do. So he has pure eyes, they say. So the story begins how Shukadev, from the very beginning of his birth, immediately left household. This verse shows Shukadev's absorption in Brahman. Seeing Vyas with clothing on, who was following his son as he left home, the women who were playing in the water became bashful and put their clothing on. They did not do so on seeing Shukadev, his son. That is astonishing. The women were not bashful on seeing my naked young son looking everywhere. On the other hand, seeing me, an old man wearing clothes, who did not even look at them, since I understood that women were playing in the water, I diverted my eyes and I was focused on finding my son. Shukadev immediately left home at the age of 16, I believe, that he left home with the idea of just absorbing himself in the reality of Brahman and went towards the forest. So, but Vyasadev saw this. He saw that when he went by, I understood the women were playing in the water and they became bashful. So I asked them the reason. When he asked, they said, you make distinctions, thinking, oh, this is man, this is woman. But your son, being equally disposed, situated in Brahman, your son does not do this. How did this situation arise? Your son has pure eyes. Vivikta drishte. We young women, skillful in the arts, have the power to know the inner truth of men and women just by looking at their eyes. After coming to the province of Kurujungala, Shukadev, wandering in Hastinapur, the capital of Bharat, like a madman, mute or a fool, how did the people of the city recognize him? How did the conversation of Parikshit with Shukadev arise? Through which was this Vaishnava scripture appeared? How has it appeared? So it was through Shukadev that this appeared, this Vaishnava Shastra. So they're inquiring about all of it, that which leads up to Maharaj Parikshit hearing this Srimad Bhagavatam from Shukadev. The great devotee would wait in the houses of married couples only as long as it took to milk a cow, purifying the inhabitants by giving spiritual benefit. The commentary says Shukadev must have remained a long time with Parikshit in order to explain this work. It could not be otherwise. Only on the pretext of begging alms, previously he would only wait for a short time when he would go to some home for some nourishment, waiting for the milk of a cow, and then he would immediately leave. But here, he sat for 7 days with Maharaj Parikshit. How did this come about, when he would never remain at one location for any length of time? However, he actually purified their houses. He went there actually for purifying them when he went begging for that milk. He went there to give all the jivas the spiritual goal of life. Text 9. O Sutta, Parikshit is called the greatest of devotees. Please tell us about his astonishing birth and activities. Why did this king, the glory of the Pandavas, neglect the wealth of kings and fast to death on the bank of the Ganga? How did it come that he also renounced the position of being king and was sitting on the bank of the Ganga, fasting, waiting to die within 7 days? How did this all come about? Why did this brave young man, to whose feet enemies brought their wealth and clearly bowed down for their own benefit, desiring to give up such wealth, which is difficult to give up, along with his life heirs? Persons honored him. They would bring their own wealth and surrender to him, recognizing him as the emperor above the position of a king as the emperor. So he was in such a glorious position, like the crown of the Pandava dynasty. So why did he give all of that up and fast to death on the Ganga? Persons who are surrendered to the Lord live for the auspiciousness of the world, extinguishing repeated birth and death and supplying material needs, and not for themselves. Why did Parikshit become renounced, giving up his body, which was the shelter of others? So many were dependent upon him. He was the king. Why did he give all of that up? The commentary explains, those surrendered to the Lord live for the auspiciousness of the world. Lokasya Shivaya. That is, their only mentality while living within this world is to do good for the people of this world. They have no selfish motive. So Maharaj Parikshit was like that. He had no selfish motive. He was living for the benefit of others, for extinguishing the material life and for giving material wealth and benefits. He would give prosperity both materially and spiritually to all. So why did he renounce all of that? The devotees live for helping people. In the manner that smoke is used to smother mosquitoes, sometimes they also benefit them materially. Parashraya means helping others. One should not give up something upon which others depend for life, even though one may personally be detached from it. If somehow or other one is assisting others, then one should not renounce that because one is benefiting those people that he's in contact with. So why did he then actually renounce that when so many people were dependent upon him? Please explain this to us. Please explain whatever I have asked you on the subject. I think that you are most capable of explaining all subjects. You have the full ability to explain to us everything. All persons are qualified for the final fruit of the tree of the Vedas, the Bhagavatam. Being the fruit of the tree, we want to hear the essence of all Vedic wisdom. Sutta begins. Sutta Uvacha. Vyasadev was born in the womb of Satyavati. He was considered a portion of the Lord, a type of avatar of the Lord, for compiling the Vedic wisdom. This all began with the third part of the Dwapara, when the Dwapara Yuga arrived in the passing of the Yugas. Commentary. In answer to the question, in which Yuga did this take place, a short account of Vyasa's birth and activities is presented. At one time, Vyasa, performing Achman with water from the Saraswati River, being purified, sat alone in isolation while the sun rose, taking Achman. Vyasa had the power to see past and future, having pure vision. Observing with his spiritual eye that the dharmas for the yugas had been destroyed upon the earth, yuga after yuga, by the invisible force of time, that the bodies had decreased in their abilities, and that the people now were devoid of faith and dominated by rajas and tamas, dull-witted, short-lived, filled with all kinds of misfortune. He began to contemplate on what would be beneficial for all. He saw the situation, and then he began to contemplate. In his meditation, he saw that Dharma was being lost, and now within the Kali Yuga, he contemplated the position of the people, unfortunate position of the people, and thought what he could do to help them, to benefit them. Commentary. He knows the past and the future. He saw that there was a destruction of the dharmas of the yugas as time passed. There was also a decrease in the strength of the bodily conditions. In other words, time was of the essence for people whose life now was short-lived. They didn't have a lot of time to perfect their spiritual life in the Kali Yuga. The people were also filled with rajas and tamas. So what could be done for these people who were described here, dull-witted, short-lived, filled with all kinds of misfortune, overpowered with rajas and tamas? The amount of goodness had diminished. Seeing the purifying power of Vedic rites performed by 4 priests for the people at large, who were not inclined for Gyan or Yoga or Bhakti, he divided the one Veda into 4 for the continuation of sacrifice. So the first thing he did was take the voluminous wisdom of the Veda and divide it into 4. These sacrifices were accomplished by 4 priests. The Hota, who became the reciter of the Rig Veda, they were assigned to different priestly classes, and there were different sampradayas for each of those. Those who were known as the Hotas became the reciter of the Rig Veda. They were the offerers of the oblations. The Udgata, who was the reciter of the Samaveda, would be the corrector if anything was seen to be out of sorts. They would say, oh, this should be done like this, like that. They would correct it, or be the observer or the overseer of the Jagna. Advaryu, the reciter of the Yajurveda, was the preparer of the items for sacrifice. They would see that everything was set up properly and correctly. And the Brahma was the reciter of the Atharva Veda and the knower of all the Vedas. He was the supervisor. So in this way, the Jagnas could go on. So first, he divided the Veda into 4, Rig, Yajur, Sama, and Atharva. And then he created what is called the 5th Veda, or the histories, Itihasya Puranam. Itihasya Puranam cha panchamo Veda uchyate. That means Itihasyas, the histories, and Puranas, and the lores of the Purana, they were the fifth. Cha Panchamo Veda, they were the fifth Veda. Uchayate, they were known as the fifth Veda. They were separate, but they were compiled because that knowledge was important. And the histories and the Puranas, the ancient lores, would describe the teachings of the Vedas in a practical way so people could understand them through stories and so forth. For the Vedas, Pila became responsible for the Rig Veda. He was the head of the Sampradaya of the Rig Veda, Pila. The wise Jaimini, the Samaveda. He was the chanter of the Samaveda. Vaishapayana became learned in the Yajurveda, and the sage Sumantu, inclined to incantations, became learned in the Atharva Veda. They were each given their divisions and sampradayas to teach their students each of that. And my father, Romaharshana Sutta, became learned in the histories and the Puranas. So Sutta is saying, my father, he became learned in the histories and the Puranas. He was given that task. In this way, the original body of the Veda is divided into four and then a fifth, including the Puranas and the histories. Each of these sages divided up his Veda into various divisions also, in accordance with how their students could understand. And these Vedas then developed branches as they were passed on from disciple to grand disciple to great-grand disciple. The Supreme Lord, Vyas, merciful to the most fallen, thus divided the Veda so that they could be understood even by the most foolish, or those who were dull-witted within this age, that they could all understand. He wanted to benefit everyone, not just a few classes of persons, or just the highest thinkers, or those with the best capacity for learning. No, everyone should be benefited, and he wanted to do that for the whole of mankind within the Kali Yuga. So this he did, and for those below the intelligent class, one may consider that there were those whose brains were not highly qualified. They would be best thinking what would be best for them, what would be the best sadhana for them, who were not highly intelligent. Vyas thought by his mercy that he would write the Mahabharata, a history in which he would include all the dharmas and wisdom of the Vedas in a story form that the people of, especially within the Kali Yuga progressed and the mentality of mankind digressed, that they could understand the wisdom of the Vedas through the study of the Mahabharata. So this was Vyasa's vision, that now that he had divided everything, he left that Mahabharata as the final work for the purpose of benefiting mankind as the intelligence of mankind became deteriorated within the progression of the Kali Yuga. O Brahmanas, though he had engaged himself in this way for the welfare of all beings, trying to put everything in place for the Kali Yuga, his heart was not satisfied. Being not completely satisfied in heart, sitting in a solitary spot on the bank of the Saraswati River, he began further thinking, there's something I have not done yet. I've divided the Vedas, I put aside the portions of the Puranas and the histories, I compiled the Mahabharata especially for the people of the age of Kali. Why am I dissatisfied? So he sat on that bank of the river Saraswati, and that knower of Dharma began to further contemplate. So we'll stop at this point here and hear of his further contemplations and how he rectified the situation of his own dissatisfaction and how he saw what would be most beneficial for mankind within this day and age, within this Kali Yuga. Jai Gaur Premanandi Harivol Shri Radhesha.